What if I told you that a comedy podcast did what police, prosecutors, and school administrators couldn't do? That four guys, mostly known for jokes and gun talk, uncovered a scandal that actually put children, real-life children, in danger. Now, I'm not saying they definitely exposed a massive, evil, systemic cover-up, but I'm also definitely saying it seems like they did. All right. Last month in April 2025, a detective from Buffalo's SVU appeared on the Unsubscribed podcast and made allegations that were shocking, let's just say. The allegations were that schools were intentionally hiding sexual assaults, destroying evidence, and obstructing police investigations. This was in regard to the Buffalo school system. Now, if you look up Buffalo school system, all the articles, all the headlines, all the news is in regard to this. So an interview on a comedy podcast erupted into a full-blown scandal, the likes of which, I mean, I haven't seen anything like this in my life, especially not one started like this. That's still unfolding to this very day. Today we're talking about how a single episode of a podcast did what traditional accountability mechanisms couldn't. The mechanisms that are in place not only in the school district we're talking about today, but also in most public school districts, and hopefully this is not a systemic problem.
The Buffalo school system has been intentionally not reporting the assaults of students, and then has also used the Buffalo Police Department's school resource officers to write reports and then had their influence over those officers to then close the reports.
Before we get to the podcast and what started all of this, we have to understand what was happening beneath the surface in Buffalo schools. In October of 2024, a high school girl twice reported physical abuse by her father to a school counselor. It wasn't a vague complaint, and the second time she showed the counselor cell phone video evidence of the abuse. In spite of the counselor being a mandated reporter, someone legally required to report suspected abuse, child abuse, whatever, the counselor did nothing 2 times. It wasn't until the girl showed up to school with visible injuries that the abuse was finally reported, which led to the father's arrest on assault and child endangerment charges. So you have to think about that for a second. A child has to show up bearing actual physical marks of abuse before a school official does what they are literally legally required to do. This, by the way, not an isolated incident. This is systemic. I never went to public school. I was homeschooled, but a lot of my friends felt safe around the counselors and teachers and things like that at school. It's supposed to be a safe spot for kids to go and learn and, socialize and do everything the kids are supposed to do. That is not what is supposed to happen. A few months later, in December of 2024, the Buffalo School Board passed a resolution calling for a formal signed agreement between Buffalo Public Schools and the Buffalo Police Department regarding school resource officers, which are the officers that are stationed in schools. So that's good. There should be officers stationed in schools just in case, kids may be kids, but they can still commit crimes and bad things can happen to people, and then they can come to school and officers can help. In spite of this resolution, the arrangement remained what officials now call a handshake deal, with no real written protocols for handling incidents. That could sound like bureaucratic nitpicking on the nose, but it does matter. Without clear protocols, standards, and operating procedures, there is no way to decide when to involve authorities or the police. Who decides what exactly is reportable and what exactly isn't? And most importantly, who the is accountable when things go wrong? Well, we don't have to wait too long to find out what happens when things go wrong. On February 11th, 2025, an incident occurred at Dr. Charles R. Drew Science Magnet School that would later become a central focus of the scandal. A magnet school, by the way, I'm not just saying random shit, that is a school that offers a more specific curriculum to attract a more diverse student body. According to initial police reports, a 30-year-old man named Shane Cronin from Illinois entered the school through a connecting door with the Buffalo Museum of Science. The report stated that Cronin approached a student and assaulted an assistant principal who intervened. Police arrested Cronin and charged him with burglary, assault, and child endangerment. So certainly a concerning incident, but what was reported wasn't the full story and wasn't even close to the full story. According to later allegations from Detective Richard High, aka Angry Cops, the actual events were significantly more serious. Cronin allegedly attempted to abduct 2 children, not 1, and school officials reportedly only told police about 1 victim, and most shockingly, they allegedly deleted surveillance video of the incident. What in the The complete story only came to light because someone at the school recorded the security footage on their cell phone, allowing investigators to discover the full scope of what happened. And this is where the story really begins, because there are systems that we know are designed to protect children that can fail, obviously, but when they fail this dramatically, this many times, sometimes it takes a comedy podcast to shine a light on what's happening. Skip ahead to April 26th, 2025, an episode of the Unsubscribed podcast dropped with the ominous title, Your Kids Are in Danger. SVU detective exposes Buffalo school system. The SVU detective is Richard High, aka Angry Cops. If you weren't familiar with him and you watched an episode, you probably would never expect to see a major expose of this scale come from that source, but being familiar with him, you wouldn't be surprised. We have Eli Cuevas, aka Eli Double Tap, a former military member known for his amazing storytelling. We've got Brandon Herrera, aka the AK Guy, a firearms and gun creator. We've got Cody, aka Donut Operator, a former police officer who creates law enforcement content, and the Fat Electrician, a military-focused content creator who makes really awesome, long, amazing, historical deep dive videos about military topics. I've been on the podcast twice now. I love those guys. They're so nice, they're so kind, and they treat myself and friends with hospitality that I have yet to experience from any other group of content creators. On this particular episode we're talking about today, they were joined by Detective Richard High, a 13-year veteran of the Buffalo Police Department who had been with the Special Victims Unit for 2 years. In the first part of the podcast, High laid out several serious allegations. He said, Buffalo schools were intentionally not reporting sexual assaults of students and other abuses, and school district attorneys and administrators were ignoring subpoenas and court orders. Also, surveillance video evidence of criminal incidents was being deleted. School officials were using influence over school resource officers to downplay incidents, and school personnel were being directed to not cooperate with police investigations. So the description there is from someone actively involved in the Buffalo police system and the relationship of that system with the Buffalo school system. That episode, as you can probably imagine, went viral due to the magnitude of the claims, and within the week there was a ton of news articles that popped up as well, so it became mainstream immediately. And the Buffalo public school system didn't wait that long to respond. The same day, they issued a statement on social media calling High's allegations untruths and stating that they were prepared to vigorously address these untruths. We have to notice the language they're using here. It's not inaccuracies or misunderstandings, but rather untruths. The implication is that High was lying. The next day, High responded on Twitter X to the district's denial, providing additional details about a case where a student was allegedly raped at school, and the principal conducted her own investigation without formally reporting it. And there you go. The battle lines are completely drawn, and both sides are dug in, and things have gotten really bad for the Buffalo school system since all this came out. And it looks like they're just getting worse and worse and worse. One thing that's interesting and honestly very scary about this entire situation is that this isn't something that's unique. This happens a lot. This type of thing happens a lot, and generally people have to go to traditional mainstream news outlets or have something maybe go viral on Facebook or whatever to actually have some form of change. Because if the powers that be don't want something to happen, if you don't have a voice, then it's just how it works. And it's how it's always worked until now, to be honest. But it's also f***ed up because there's no way that this is the only place that this is happening. There's no way that this is the only place where people aren't being listened to, and it takes a comedy podcast to come in and like make change. It's unbelievable. I think it was genius that High took these allegations to his friend's podcast instead of to a local news station. What would have happened? A 2-minute segment on the evening news and then a carefully worded newspaper article that placed his claims alongside official denials from the Buffalo school system? Maybe that would have happened, or maybe nothing at all would have happened. On top of that, the episode centers on High's direct experiences as an SVU officer, giving his allegations immediate and instant credibility to viewers.
I can't tell you the amount of shit that I have to go through in order to go to a school, talk to a principal and say, what did the kid tell you? And they'll go, I can't talk to you. I've got to talk to my lawyers.
It's not like me talking about it or, some random Joe Blow talking about it, some commentary channel. It's an actual guy involved directly who has experienced things like this for his entire career. On top of that, the level of emotional authenticity that these guys showed, genuinely they care about this. There's no arguing with it.
It's in your job to protect the kids. I can't tell you how many I'll tell you another one. I had a girl that was, man, I'll get fucked up.
All in all, the whole thing was the opposite of a carefully crafted media appearance. It's just a raw thing that resonates with real, actual people who don't like it when this type of stuff happens. They don't give a if their tenure is going to be up at their school system or whatever. It is only through a comedy podcast that this could have come out. Piggybacking off that point, the story might have ended with the school district's denial if not for the massive public attention that the podcast generated and the relentlessness of the unsub audience. Within 48 hours, the narrative shifted pretty dramatically. On April 28th, 2025, just 2 days after the podcast aired, the Buffalo Board of Education held a special meeting where they spent nearly 3 hours in executive session behind closed doors.
Tonight, the Buffalo Board of Education staying behind closed doors, spending almost 3 hours discussing the shocking cover-up allegations made over the weekend.
When they emerged, board president Dr. Kathy Evans Brown announced, "The BOE is initiating an independent external investigation and the results will be heard publicly." It's exactly what the she sounded like. So yeah, just a couple days later, that seems to be a significant shift from the initial blanket denial of untruth. Big jump, gotta say, big jump. Hey man, that's an untruth. Just kidding. 2 days later, I've slept on it. I think we need an independent investigation. That does not happen without extraordinary pressure, okay? So congratulations, Unsub Podcast and audience of Unsub Podcast. You guys did some badass shit there. The Buffalo Police Department also issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging the situation, drastically different from the police district. They said, "The Buffalo Police Department is aware of the concerns raised by one of our members regarding the handling of incidents involving student safety. We are committed to conducting thorough investigations to ensure transparency and accountability." You have to notice that they didn't say, "He lying! Untruth! They didn't say they disciplined him. They didn't say his claims were false. They acknowledged concerns and committed to transparency and accountability. You know, I would say that suggests there's something that's actually there and the police department is aware of it and trying to fucking deal with it. And meanwhile, the Buffalo Police Benevolent Association, which is a police union, issued a statement supporting High, calling him a passionate detective in the Buffalo Police Department who prioritizes the well-being of the city's most vulnerable victims. That's pretty significant as well. Police unions in general, do not typically rush to support people who make unfounded allegations against powers that be. The Erie County District Attorney Office also weighed in, stating that they were committed to a thorough investigation and prosecution of any crime against a child, and that they continue to handle any allegation of sexual assault, child abuse, and tampering with evidence with the utmost seriousness. And fortunately, by early May 2025, the Erie County District Attorney's Office announced that Shane Cronin, remember him, the guy from the Drew Science Magnet School incident where he tried to kidnap 2 children, they announced that he had been indicted by a grand jury on multiple felony charges, including second-degree attempted kidnapping and attempting to lure a child. So that supports at least some aspects of High's allegations about the severity of the incident that was being downplayed when he broke that in the Unsub podcast. Since High's initial appearance on the Unsub pod, he has been on multiple other podcasts and back on the Unsub podcast, turning a one-time whistleblow into a sustained campaign of attrition against a school district that's f***ed up. The Buffalo School Board, meanwhile, has worked to identify a firm to conduct the independent investigation that they commit to allowing, with a focus on the Drew Science Magnet School incident. And it seems that they are expanding the scope of the initial planned investigation to include additional allegations that have come to light. It's crazy. You go from instant denial to action. Weird. That's ridiculous. It's not a year-long investigative journalism project that slowly built up pressure. It was a podcast episode. It created instant public attention and institutions could not ignore it. Nor can they do anything to fucking stop it. Overall, the public response to the allegations from the Unsub pod were immediate and intense. The original podcast had 16,000 comments, many from concerned parents and community members who are, affected by the Buffalo School Board and District. Social media in general sort of blew up with discussions about school safety, mandatory reporting, and accountability, and how this hopefully isn't happening elsewhere. This is just like the sort of hornet's nest. Beyond just online chatter from the public response, real world action actually followed. Bury the Violence, a community organization led by Karima Morris, herself a graduate of the Charles R. Drew Science Magnet School, launched a petition calling for immediate security and safety reforms following the podcast's revelations, including installation of secure entry systems, upgraded surveillance systems, establishment of a centralized security communication hub, development of a communication strategy for incidents, and comprehensive review of safety policies across all district schools. This is f***ed up, dude. I have a candy company. It's a food manufacturing business, and we have all of our operating procedures just laid out so clearly. So if the FDA comes, we don't get in trouble because we actually care about what we're doing. It is mind-boggling to me, and obviously that, that's not a valid comparison, but you have to have rules laid out. You have to, because there's oversight. We respect oversight. When you hear about a story like this, she's calling for these things, like installation of secure entry systems. You mean like doors that lock? They don't have that? They don't have surveillance systems? Like, why do they need this stuff? This stuff should already be there. It's f***ed up that they're allowed to get away with this because it's a government. All right, I've been telling y'all this shit my whole life. A private school would have been shut down instantly if anything like this happened, but no, public school, government money, bureaucracy. You just kind of do whatever the you want. You can be evil, and who's going to stop you? Corruption is good for those who are involved in the corruption. Another particularly interesting thing is how traditional media, especially media local to that area, responded to the story. Their coverage was pretty revealing. Some local news outlets were more skeptical of the format than of the allegations themselves. WKBW anchor Ed Dranch, for instance, commented that the podcast seemed ridiculous and crazy.
So I'll be honest with you, I started watching this podcast and my first thought was, this is ridiculous.
What is this?
This is crazy. I'm listening to all these guys burp and just be absolutely foul.
His focus was not on whether or not the claims from High were true in regard to the school board and district in his local area, but on whether the podcast was crazy and insane. These crazy kids and their wild podcast.
You're looking at like the White Claws on
Yeah.
the table.
And
is
so
alcohol involved here?
My
Where
first
are they?
thought is, okay, this can't actually be real. But then when you actually listen to the allegations, you unpack what he's saying.
Other outlets prioritize the official response from the Buffalo School Board over the allegations. WGRZ initially published the school district's denial before reporting on the actual allegations, waiting nearly 24 hours to publish details about High's claims. The experts say, I generally do trust the experts, by the way. I'm not doing that meme, all right? The officials say, this is a clear example of privileging institutional voices over the voices of whistleblowers. This is a classic local news L. Others focused on the messenger instead of the message itself. Buffalo News spent significant space discussing High's controversial history as a police officer rather than focusing on the allegations. This included the mentioning of a previous suspension for social media posts, which is like, what? What about all the school board stuff, though? I mean, sure. Luckily, as the story has developed, the local news has begun actually sort of taking action, and their media coverage has evolved from the initial skepticism to a more substantive investigation. WGRZ conducted a data investigation that revealed 17,722 police responses to Buffalo schools since September 2021, which provided factual support for some of High's claims about the frequency of incidents in schools. 17,000 since 2021. That's a lot. That's more than one a day, I'm pretty sure. That's a lot. That seems like a way too many. Way too many. Anyways, initially things were pretty hairy, but it seems like this whole thing is turning into a really good story, and it's gonna have an actual positive, heavy outcome. There has been some concrete changes already. For example, the charges against Shane Cronin, the man that was involved in the Drew Science Magnet School incident that I talked about earlier. That guy's as he should be. Oh, and in case you didn't remember, he was charged with misdemeanor assault. A misdemeanor. Initially. Why is that? Why did they charge this guy trying to kidnap children with misdemeanor assault and then indict him from a federal grand jury on multiple felony counts of kidnapping? How does that change? How the does that change? Why'd that change? Is that a coincidence? Is he part of the school board? Like, what's going on? Why did a podcast have to make that change? If the podcast had never come out, that guy would just have a couple months for his misdemeanor. What? Also, one of the first things we mentioned was the mandatory reporting failure from the school board. Public awareness of mandatory reporting requirements has increased dramatically as a result of the podcast as well. Buffalo Teachers Federation President Rich Nigro publicly emphasized that anybody who's working within a school, if you're working with children in the Buffalo public schools or in that capacity anywhere, you are a mandated reporter. So this is a good public reinforcement of legal obligations that someone shouldn't have to be reinforced to do, but thankfully the podcast put pressure on school employees to follow the law. Anyways, I'm glad that this happened. I'm glad that the Unsub podcast exists. I'm glad that these dudes did this, and I'm glad that all this came out, and I'm glad that they wanted me to shed some light on this. I asked them if they wanted to. Obviously, I don't want to like co-opt this. It's a very real, serious thing. So any way that I can help, I would suggest all of you go check out the Unsub pod, watch the original episode, check out Richard High, check out all the guys and see what they're doing on Twitter. That's where most of the shit is happening right now. And just go help out. There's not really much you probably can do other than just pay attention to what's going on and how the school board is reacting. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and yeah,